Now, Robbo, thank you for answering the call, because I wanted to have a chat to you because you were there in New South Wales when it felt like the entire public conversation was, for God's sake, what are we going to do about King's Cross? And essentially demanding that the lockout law system that had existed and worked in places like Newcastle should be brought into Sydney. Well, here we are a few years later, and the government has gone through this torturous process of now trying to work out a way to undo the very things they put in place. How do you feel about this as somebody who was there, sitting through all of that process, to now see it undone?
So I started being angry. I've now reached the point where I've read the 40 recommendations. I brought them with me. There are a couple of things that concern me. First of all, what I saw, because before these laws came into effect, I walked around King's Cross. I walked through the Sydney CBD on Friday and Saturday nights with the police. I saw what can only be described as a chaotic disregard for public order on the part of a lot of people that were there. There were publicans who were more interested in pouring grog down the throats of people and getting money when they created a problem on their premises, just throwing them out on the street and going, well, my hands are clean and it's not my problem, and an unwillingness to take responsibility for what was going on, blaming everyone else bar themselves for what was going on. And it was extraordinary. I can still remember walking down King's Cross with 4 uniformed police officers, and I was between a couple of them, and a few minutes earlier someone had said, one of the officers had said, it's not unusual to have people walk through you, drop their shoulder into you and just keep walking, and I swear 30 seconds later that's what happened. These places were just mayhem, and something had to happen. We had fatalities, and everyone talks about the 2 fatalities, which were the real tragedies. But there were a whole range of other brain injuries and the like, where people are still alive, but with significant brain injuries. And we had health professionals. I can remember standing outside St Vincent's Hospital doing press conferences on Sunday mornings with medical staff who would talk about the trauma the families were going through, the trauma that the people who'd worked on these young people had been through, and something had to change. And to that extent, I think what we've seen is a significant shift. The fact that this committee doesn't say get rid of the lockout laws in King's Cross, I think speaks volumes about the fact that, well, we're not really sure what's going to happen. I've read the recommendations. There are none of the recommendations that really go beyond what was talked about in 2014. You know, 24-hour transport was something that we talked about at the time, and a whole range of other things. My concern is that, yep, OK, let's see how it goes, but my real worry is that we've got a problem with alcohol in this country, and I'm no wowser, I like a beer and all the rest of it, but it tends to lead to people who shouldn't think they can fight, thinking they can fight. They want to punch on. They don't think about it because they're so full of grog that they are unable to think straight. And my concern is we will go back to where we were. My final point on this is I think that people are being conned. We keep hearing about these venues saying, oh, and people talking about live music. There are so few and were so few live music venues, and I've said this previously at this very table. You know, the Whitlams wrote a song about blow up the pokies. The pokies killed live music in this industry, not the lockout laws. The pubs chose to close at 3 a.m. They weren't compelled to close at 3 a.m. They were only told to stop serving alcohol. If they wanted to play live music, if they wanted to have people dance, they were able to stay open. There was nothing said they could close. They chose to close, and then what they've done is dress this up into something else. So I'm not angry, I'm disappointed, and I'm concerned. I'm particularly concerned for the cops on the front line, the paramedics, the medicos and the nursing staff who could be potentially confronted with what was happening 5 years ago.
Who, ironically, in about 18 months' time, there'll be campaigns, to all of that. Look, Jared, my point about this is that, look, I think maybe the citywide ban was always a bit too much. John's right, the fact that the actual sort of scene of the original crime is not being really loosened, and no one's suggesting that. But I believe that part of having a liquor licence in central Sydney, central Brisbane, central Melbourne is if you want to have 24-hour boozing, that's fine, but your kitchen should be open 24 hours a day as well. Your ability to get food, because one of the big problems when we talk about international cities is that you should be able to eat something more than a packet of chips at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, well, that's right. Look, we've gone through this stage in Queensland as well with, in fact, I went to Newcastle in 2009 on an inquiry, parliamentary inquiry looking at the laws, and then I was the Attorney General in Queensland who introduced the safe night precincts. And we took a view that we weren't going to punish the majority for the sins of a few. And we increased the penalties, we increased the police resources, and we said if you're going to misbehave out in Caxton Street or if you're going to misbehave in the Valley, then you'll cop it with the new laws we put in place. We also put the new laws, the one-punch laws, we strengthened those to ensure people were going to jail if they were committing these offences. So we took a really hardline approach. But then it got silly with this new government. They put in the ID scanners, that everyone who came out of a Suncorp stadium, matched 50,000 people, after 10 o'clock at night having to ID scan as they were going into the restaurants, not just pubs but also restaurants. It just became silly. So now we're in this process in Queensland as well. They're winding back laws they've put in place over the last 3 years because they've just gone too far one way.
And I tell you what, of all of the late night venues in Brisbane that you don't want to hand over your ID to get scanned, strip joints, which is exactly what happens in Brisbane. All right, you turn up to Love and Rockets, you go to Honeybees, and you go, yeah, that's my name and address and my photo. I'm really glad there's a record of this being here. Anyway, I've got to take a quick break.
I did mention Caxton Street.
Yes, no. Well done. I'll mention them by name. Fine establishments. You know, I support small business in all of its forms.